Hi everyone, this week on New Narrative, a new website. Thank you everyone for your patience as we've been preparing this new website, and we have launched this week with a new design and lots of behind the scenes improvements. So please let us know what you think at feedback@newnarrative.com. And please especially do let us know if you find any bugs or any problems. There's bound to be some problems with a new website, so please do let us know if you find anything wrong. But do let us know what you think of the design, and this will not be the last time that we improve things. We're going to keep iterating and improving the website, so please do let us know what you think. Today, where's mutual aid? That's WARES. Now, this is really interesting today because it's a mutual aid community in a country which is supposed to be not just one of the richest in the world, but which has a government famous for efficiency and for extensive intervention in society. So the question then arises, well, if Singapore's so rich and the government does so much, quite famously, for society, why do we need these mutual aid, independent mutual aid community networks? Well, experts have estimated that around 1/3 of Singapore lives in poverty. And civil society is meeting that need independently of the government. And from Where's Mutual Aid specifically, is matching people who have needs with people who can offer support. So today, Sean and I talked to a volunteer with Where's Mutual Aid who explained to us how it works and why it exists. And in support of the principle that the community and system should be the focus, not the people involved, the volunteer has requested to be anonymous. So there's no video and she is not identified by name. We do hope you'll enjoy this. Do check out Where's Mutual Aid at gg.gg/Where's Mutual Aid. And as always, if you like what we do, please do join us as a member, newnarrative.com/join. And also you can donate at newnarrative.com/donate. We've also got a new scheme where if you are in need of a membership, if you'd like a membership but you can't afford one, just write in sponsorship@newnarrative.com. And if you'd like to sponsor someone else's free membership, you can go to the website and just buy one or more, buy as many as you like, buy 100 memberships for people, and we will distribute that to people who request memberships. So all of this on newnarrative.com, do check it out. But now, where's mutual aid? Hello and welcome back to Political Agenda with me, your host, PJ Thum, and once again co-hosting today, Sean Francis Han. Hello, Sean.
Hey, thanks so much for having me on again. Very interested about today's show. We've been talking about a lot of the public faces of activism, young activism in Singapore, but today we have an activist who's a little bit more behind the scenes, somebody who does their work sort of quietly, right? Sort of anonymously, right? Not as public and out there. And that's definitely another way of being an activist or doing activism in Singapore that often doesn't really get as much of the limelight, doesn't get talked about as much or enough. So,
Yes.
I mean, without further ado, let's jump right into it.
A volunteer from Where's Mutual Aid, WARES Mutual Aid. Well, welcome.
Hello.
So, can you tell us first, Where's, what is Where's, and that's separate from Where's Mutual Aid, right?
Yes, so Wares is basically like a library and info shop, and basically it's a space where people can go to just, relax and kind of not, I guess the idea is not to think about your productivity or being a cog in the machine, and just to have that space in the library. I mean, those are the ideals behind the space of the library. And so, you know, we have books there, we have like zines, lots of zines from the region, and yeah, just a space where we can gather in common.
Wow, that sounds great.
Yeah.
Bastion from, neoliberal capitalism.
Exactly.
I think we all need a bit of that.
So the
nowadays.
obvious question, and pardon the pun, where's Wes?
Oh, so Wares is nestled in Southwallstads. We share a library. So if you want to drop by, you can kind of like drop us a DM on the Facebook.
What is Southwallstads though?
Oh, Southwallstads is like an arts collective.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. So there's Where's and then there's Where's Mutual Aid, right? Tell us more about Where's Mutual Aid. What's that about?
Yeah, so the mutual aid sheet was started, I think, quite early when the COVID crisis was really starting to hit us. There were already mutual aid sheets popping out, worldwide, by like in other countries. And the form itself is very simple. It's basically a spreadsheet where you can list your needs and you can list your offers, like what are the things that you can offer to the community. And then, people can look at the sheet and then, kind of like organize together in terms of like, okay, is there someone that I can offer my help to? Is there someone that I can, even if I can't give directly, that maybe I can help to organize in terms of like finding information for them and, things like that.
I mean, so I have a very good sense now about sort of what it is and the concept behind it, but how has that kind of played out in Singapore, right? I mean, we're not used to this
Yes,
kind of community spirit kind of thing. It's
Exactly.
every man for himself,
Yeah.
right? It's a rat race, right? Now, how has that worked out so far?
Yeah, so, trying to find a translation for mutual aid in our own languages can be quite difficult. My friend was asking, how do you translate mutual aid in Malay? And I was like, I'm not really sure. Like, it's not even like tolong menolong, which is like helping, because fundamentally mutual aid is about reciprocity. It's about dismantling the hierarchy that is often inherent in the process of giver and receiver. And I guess gotong royong actually comes very closely to the definition of mutual aid. And gotong royong sadly has also kind of been, I guess, like,
Co-opted?
yeah, co-opted, right? Because when you think about what is the dominant mode of social work in Singapore, it's like many helping hands approach. So in fact, when I talked about mutual aid, someone actually asked me, like, isn't that just the many helping hands approach? They'll say, how is that different from the dominant model, and is it not like looking at the systemic issues that are making people in need, when you just want to address their needs very directly, but it's different.
Yeah.
So I think in Singapore, it has been quite interesting, because when you're involved in the mutual aid volunteer work, you see how it's really a process for people to unlearn very instinctive things when they are met with a person in need, in terms of how far do I get to push in terms of asking someone about the verifiability of their ask. And then I guess like people would have the automatic sometimes response, at least in the beginning, like, have you tried asking your MP? Did you apply for SSO? All these things. And then that's, I guess in some way, okay, maybe it's not their fault, but after a while, you realize people on the receiving end of these things, they get these statements all the time.
Yeah.
When they're asking for help. And in fact, a lot of them actually are already receiving like state assistance, or they can't because they don't qualify.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So tell us more about sort of like dismantling the power dynamic. I got a
Yeah.
rough sense of what you're
Yes.
talking about, right? Typically, there's a big, powerful individual or a group and it's handing out freebies, right? And there's obviously a power dynamic there, but tell us a little bit more about that power dynamic and then sort of how your how Where's Mutual Aid is kind of working to undo that.
So one of the main dictums in mutual aid is solidarity, not charity. And what's happening, especially in a place like Singapore, is that people kind of, I guess, they compartmentalize. They don't feel that, because we already have like social workers, we have police, we have the state, and then you think, okay, well, all these people will help me to settle, will not help me, but like help people who need helping. Like they will help the people in need, and so I don't have to worry about that because I pay my taxes and my taxes go to the state, and then the state will help those in need. So I relinquish responsibility. And so the needs of another person within our community who is not our direct relative or friend doesn't really seem like something that we are very attached to. But the thing is, these institutions, when we kind of just let them operate on their own, we don't pay attention to them, especially because we don't need them, if we don't come against them, right? If we are privileged enough to, we don't see the kind of violence and exclusion that is inherent within these institutions, the power dynamic that they operate from, the value systems that they have that might be very different from our own. And so for us in the mutual aid team, we don't want to reproduce the power dynamic and the oppression and the violence that can be present in these institutions, because these institutions are run by people, right? And people are just not perfect.
Yeah.
And
I really resonate with that point about the violence of big institutions and the exclusion that comes with that, because I'm reminded of like trans sex workers, right, who find it difficult to apply for these grants, who find it difficult to come out into these institutions and be seen and be visible. And that's the violence and the exclusion. So yeah, I never kind of thought about it that way, but that mutual aid is a real alternative that is inclusive and it doesn't bring to bear these violences and these exclusions.
Exactly.
Also, you've touched on this broader framework, I think, that has come out through some of these interviews that we've had, which is that what we have is a government system in welfare and other ways, which as much as possible towards verifiability and avoiding abuse and controlling the doling out of welfare as much as possible. But this is a spectrum, right? The avoiding abuse is one end of the spectrum, but accessibility is the other end of the spectrum, where the harder you make it, the more gatekeeping you do to ensure that people are verified, that they actually deserve things, the more forms they have to fill in, the more hoops they have to jump through, the harder it is for them to access. But this way, the government can say, not a drop is wasted, it's all efficient, not a cent is wasted, it's all efficient, and there's no abuse of the system. But a lot of people who legitimately need help get left out. And the debate for us should be where along this spectrum we stand versus how the PAP usually puts it, which is either you have this system or people abuse the system, right? Which is a false dichotomy.
Yeah.
So it sounds like what you're doing is disintermediating and trying to take away some of these gatekeepers and to create a greater community effort to support each other that avoids the problem of this massive gatekeeper. And because of course the other thing, the violence in the system you talked about, like the government then uses their ability to control welfare, their monopoly of welfare in many cases, to then shape us and say you can only get welfare if you are a certain kind of person. You're married in a straight cisgender heterosexual relationship with 2 or 3 children, and you live in an HDB flat, and you have regular wage work, and so you're part of the capitalist wage labor system, which is exploitative, and so on and so forth, right? You have to conform, and you get a lot of people who cannot access the welfare or even do not, right? There's a lot of it's also documented by researchers how there's a lot of people out there who want and genuinely need it, but either for various reasons, pride, for example, or unwillingness to go through all the loops, or simply thinking, oh, other people need it more, why should I apply? They don't access the welfare. So, what you're doing is actually incredibly powerful, because you're challenging one of the very fundamental pillars of power of this government, which is the ability to control how our tax dollars are redistributed to society, as welfare. Yeah.
I want to jump off something that PJ mentioned just now, right? Which is verifiability, right? So how do you and how does Where's Mutual Aid deal with that, right? I'm sure that, some people out there who are going to be saying, oh, it's just, people are going to abuse this whole thing. How do you navigate that?
Yeah, so the whole thing about mutual aid is like, this reciprocity, right? And which means that there is not going to be some organization there for you to help you verify and make you feel better about where your money is going. Now that is going to be your own responsibility. And that's, so people are going to have to do it themselves. So you are going to have to, if you see someone who lists their needs, then you contact them and you talk to them, what's your need, blah, blah, blah. And then if you feel comfortable, you give. If you don't, you don't have to. And then, it's really just like that. But the thing is, I don't know, that we live in a kind of system where everything is kind of like done for you, that you offset responsibilities or certain sorts of labor, so that it's easier for you. And it's the same with welfare. You have offset that labor of getting to know the other person and their needs to a social worker institution, so that all that you have to do is give money. You remove that first interaction that is needed, like a human to human interaction, that's just not really present in the way things are. And I think, actually when I talk about violence of institutions, it's not like literally bloody beating up kind of violence, but the violence of bureaucracy, it's and just like the banality of it, all these hoops that people have to jump through, and it has a very material impact on their lives that people don't see.
Have there been any little weasels that have, sort of come in and then made weird requests or tried to be funny with the system? Have you ever gotten that?
Yeah, maybe we did. I think actually, and it's actually a very instructive and teaching moment for the community, right? So maybe this thing has happened. And of course we have our ideals, right? We want to believe everyone that this is a great community and system, nobody would abuse it, and it functions on trust, right? So what's happening is an abuse of trust if someone abuses the trust that has been established with another person, and then they kind of try to weasel, blah, blah, blah. And I think the question is, how do you respond to such situations in a way that does not reproduce the punitiveness and the violence of institutions?
So now I'm really excited to know, how do you reproduce that without reproducing the punitiveness?
Yes. So honestly, when these things happen, it can be very draining, and it can... because you're trying to figure out what happened, and maybe you feel some sense of responsibility also, you wanted to help someone, and then everyone in the community also has that desire, because why else would they be volunteering in a mutual aid community? But at the end of the day, we honestly, for me personally, I'll just speak for myself personally. I mean, if someone is in a good situation, like financially, they're secure, they wouldn't even need to do something like that. It's not like you're gonna get a ton of money by listing your need in the mutual aid sheet. And I think that should something like that happen, it cannot define the whole operation, like what's happening. And in the larger scheme of things, and which is something that I think people need to remember also in terms of like abuse of the system, it's a very small minority compared to the larger good that has been done and can be done within this system. And yeah, like for me, I think you just keep on keeping on. And honestly, the mutual aid community, because we are quite tight knit and we know each other, if any of these shady things go on, you can find out quite quickly because you can corroborate with each other. You know, it's not like I don't.
I mean, like, there's always a sense of like you know, that trust.
Exactly.
There are networks of in the community. But I mean, sort of on that note, right? What are the relations between WARES Mutual Aid and the community? Sort of how do you work with them? What are some of the interesting relations that you've made? What's your relationship with, you know, the community at large that is using these you know, this service?
Well, it's really great because mutual aid, the community, the spreadsheet, it's really organic. It will be as good as how the community makes it out to be, right? If people don't respond, then it just will die down. But it's great because there has been a lot of response and organizing within the group by people. Like, really, they just organize themselves. And there have been burnouts, but it's really interesting because they would even organize like Zoom meetings to kind of discuss several issues, including the burnout or like certain cases. And that has been great. I think that one of the main joys I feel in mutual aid is how you relearn how to relate to each other in a healthier way. How do you navigate power dynamics that may be present within an exchange with another person? And we have had fights even, and we have had very passionate debates, but it's really interesting because we are not, you know, in the context of the mutual aid community, we are not as isolated as in other spaces. So we were able in some way to really discuss things because we already have like an overarching set of values that kind of govern how we relate to each other. And so that has been really great to see. Yeah.
Does it go beyond mutual aid though? So you mentioned that there was a Zoom call just now, but I'm wondering, are there little iterations of where the community kind of comes together, do more than just give and receive and you know, and aid each other, right? Are there iterations where there is more that comes out of the community, something beyond the initial project of mutual aid?
Yeah, I mean, okay, so I guess honestly, like these organizing, the healing of relations, that is par for the course in terms of like mutual aid organizing. It's part of but other things that has been great to see is like, for example, how people organize to raise funds. So for example, like on Instagram, we have like the WARES Book Fair. Yeah, so the book readers in Instagram would actually like list the books that they wanted to sell and have like a virtual book fair. And it has raised about over 20,000.
Wow.
Yeah, which they would directly distribute to people in need in the sheet.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then there has also been WARES thrifting. So people would sell their clothes and then say directly that, okay, the proceeds from this sale will go to people in need. In the WARES spreadsheet. Yeah, so you know, those two things are happening on Instagram. So hashtag WARES Book Fair, hashtag WARES Thrifting. And there have been you can't see, but I'm wearing earrings right now that is like from this Instagram called supper.market, and it's this person who sells handmade earrings, and then the proceed goes to West Mutual Aid. So there has been a lot of this like organizing that's happening even on the periphery. So it's kind of like operating on its own in a way, the organizing, which is great, which is what I think is the best thing that can happen for Mutual Aid. Yeah.
Can I just ask a dumb question? Okay, so all of you are volunteers. Can you just give us a bit more detail? What do you actually do, right? It sounds like a huge amount of organizing and emotional labor, but for our listeners, can you actually tell us what because you can understand Where's Mutual Aid as a spreadsheet and people look at the spreadsheet. So what do the volunteers do?
Well, honestly, it feels a bit strange also to say that I'm a volunteer. I trying to think of it like, okay, I guess volunteer is the word for me, but I guess it's just like if you're concerned enough and you want to be involved, then you can be involved as a person. And basically, we have like a Telegram channel where we have updates of like recent needs and requests. Yeah, requests and offers on the spreadsheet. And we also have like a group chat. So if people want to, like in the Telegram channel, they can click the discuss button and then they join the group chat. And then in that group chat is where people can like boost requests, discuss things related to the mutual aid community, and all of those things. So that's where I think a lot of the organizing happens, when people actually interact with each other directly in that group chat. So that's where people have planned, like for example, how to have like a pod in a separate community, like in the Tampines area, for example. They have discussed legal issues, like legal advice for people who are in debt. And actually right now there's a lot of people who are experiencing serious debt issues. There'll be people giving advice about like unlicensed moneylenders, and we even had like a social worker once come in, like trying to give like offer her expertise in terms of like how do you navigate certain, I guess, welfare. Yeah.
Oh, wow. So this is a way bigger than just a spreadsheet.
Definitely.
You're let's say a member of a community, and you're actually not just facilitating these acts of solidarity, reciprocity, but you're also organizing all these other forms of education and support through this Telegram.
Yes.
Oh, wow. And of course, there's a huge amount of emotional labor, because I assume that many of the people you're interacting with are in great distress, and you're also supporting them emotionally through very difficult times.
Actually, yeah, it's really difficult. I think people always think of mutual aid in really, I guess, like inspiring terms, and it is really inspiring work, but a lot of people have also burned out. Like it's really not easy. And I mean, a lot of us going into it, we're young, we are not like trained professionals, we are not social workers, we are not workers within an institution, I guess, which means we have to learn a lot of these things as it goes along. The learning curve is really steep in the mutual aid, when you get involved in mutual aid. But I think it's really important also, actually, like basically what's happening with when you kind of like compartmentalize welfare and all of these things, is that people don't know how a lot of these things work. They don't know the how the system operates, and so when you get involved in this work, then you actually get to know how a lot of people are directly impacted. And so I mean, it's quite hard. You would have to, I guess, actually, like one of the things I always remember is this person, she was requesting for help, and I was talking to her, trying to get a better sense of her needs and everything. And she said like, oh, thank you, this is the first time that I asked for help and people didn't look down on me. So I think that's fundamentally really important. In a lot of the way the system functions, there is power there in that exchange, which makes the recipient feel so powerless. They are aware of how they are being seen actually by the system. They are aware that the moment they ask for help, the automatic lens that is being placed on them is one of like a skepticism. Yeah. And so I think that emotional openness, that sense of care in the community is really important. But of course, if you care, then, and if you are open, that means that you're also in a sense like emotionally vulnerable. We see a lot of terrible things, like, you know, like you would see sometimes even people's wounds from abuse. You would see, you know, like just really terrifying things.
How do you deal with that though? I mean,
well,
that's got to be rough, right?
It's
I
rough,
mean, for
yeah.
you're an activist. You're doing this work out of this care and then you see this horrible stuff, you know, that you're not necessarily trained professionally to deal with. How do you manage that?
Yeah, it's really difficult, but I think the thing to realize, I guess, about when you're in a community, you're not alone. So one of the best things I think about mutual aid is that the labor is spread out.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's also something that we need to learn, because initially I was quite, I guess, managerial, which is very antithetical to the spirit of mutual aid. Like, I wanted to control everything because I wanted to help people so much, right?
Yeah.
But I realized that didn't help anybody. You need to like spread the labor out, and so that people can also learn through that process. And so yeah, like even that emotional difficulty is not born alone.
Yeah.
And I mean, maybe we need to feel that, honestly. Like, all I'm seeing is a picture of someone's wounds, but I'm not the one going through that. Like, it's like, no matter how difficult it is, I think we always remember that it's worse for the person who going through the situation. And really, I mean, a lot of the times when people want to help in other situations, like in the domain of, like, let's say charity, you only know of a person's case. You don't know their personality, their life. Sometimes there's no follow-up. But in mutual aid, we really see, like, one person can go through so much in a year. We help them with this one need, something happens. We help them with that, another thing happens. And you see the accumulative effect of failures in the system, basically. They are going through so much, and that actually just really viscerally shows you the failure of the current system. Yeah.
I mean, this is great. That's beautiful, right? I think that's something that, you know, we don't often think about it, right? We often think about politics or activism, or at least I did, right, in terms of, like, you know, angry, railing against the system, sort of coming out and making speeches and getting together with a particular cause, right? But, you know, this idea of setting up a community, right, and a spreadsheet, right, that's something that I think it's such a novel and beautiful way of doing activism, and that really speaks to me. And then the idea of just dispersing that workload through the community, I think that's really beautiful, right? But are there plans to sort of continue this good work, right? Are you aiming at sustainability? How is this going to go? You know, I know we can't imagine it right now, but when COVID is done, is this still going to be around?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess I've thought about it a lot of times, but I haven't really discussed it with the rest of the group. These issues that people are facing, as long as the system is the way it is, it's going to be forever. The COVID crisis is just, it was maybe an intensification of an already present crisis for a lot of people. And I don't think we can just drop the ball when, like, COVID ends. I don't see how we can just disengage from the mutual aid community that has been set up. I guess our hope is that more people would kind of join and coordinate together, so that, you know, the labor is more spread out, because sometimes it can get very tiring. And I think for me, that would help in terms of, like, sustainability if more people get involved. But it's also really inherent and just really present in most of the mutual aid communities and spreadsheets worldwide, that the needs far outstrip the offers of requests and the amount of help that can be, and the amount of help and the amount of coordinating that can be given to the amount of needs, because there's just so much, like there's just so many people going through precarity and loss of jobs and like healthcare crisis. A lot of people in need actually, they can't pay for their healthcare. And I mean, in Singapore, if you need life-saving treatment, they won't deny you lah. Like they will still wheel you in, but you still have those debts at the end of the day, and it's really really difficult. Yeah. So, in terms of sustainability, hopefully, if more people can join, that would be great. Yeah.
But ultimately, what you're saying, it's a systemic issue, and it feels like, as incredible as your work is, you're getting people together to plug leaks on the Titanic as we collectively sail merrily towards an iceberg. And is systemic change the only way then to really, in the long term, address many of these issues, right? Everything you've described, they are systemic problems.
Yes.
So, listening to you talk about community, getting together, I kept thinking, if only we as a society could collectively get together and create an institution to which we all say pay a small proportion of our income, let's call it a tax, and then that institution, we could vote for people to be part of it, and then that group could then make some policies to help us all lead better lives collectively as a society. If only we had some sort of institution like that, and one which treated us, and this is probably the hardest part, with dignity and respect, didn't treat us like potential criminals or economic digits, and would respect the wealth, the needs of every individual, and treat everyone on their own merits. If only we had some sort of institution like that in Singapore.
No, yeah. The moment you have hierarchy, at least my personal belief, the moment you have a hierarchy which is always present in institutions, there's gonna be trouble. So I guess mutual aid, fundamentally, it's deinstitutionalized. And that's why it functions the way it does and escapes a lot of those problems. And we actually are very aware that it's whatever we're doing now is like plugging leaks, like terrible leaks, and that this work has to be done in tandem with advocating for real serious systemic change. But here's another thing is that we are plugging leaks, but we're also learning how to treat each other better, to care for each other better. And that is so important, because if you want to change society, like you're not going to be able to do that if you cannot change even the relations in your closest circle. How do you heal that? And that's what we also learn in mutual aid. Yeah.
I think that's a very powerful point, right? That our values collectively as a society also help determine our government, the policies, the incentive structures around us.
Definitely.
So it's not enough for us to say, the government needs to change policies. We also have to think about, why do we treat each other with suspicion?
Exactly.
Why do we treat each other like economic digits?
Exactly.
Why do we have an attitude that we are supposed to screw each other over?
Yes. Yes. I just remembered this, like Lee Hsien Loong some years back, he actually said that we need to steal somebody's lunch or something.
Yes.
He said that.
Otherwise other people steal our lunch.
Yes. I'm just like,
such a deeply offensive
you said
statement.
that? And it's not like he said it, like, and they reported it, so we saw it, but he's just saying what a lot of people believe, but we need to really interrogate where that belief come from, right? And kind of like, why were we conditioned to believe something as awful as that? Where we believe that our survival is dependent on the deprivation of somebody else. Yeah.
I mean, I never sort of understand that sort of double narrative that we have in this state, right? That Singapore is sort of simultaneously this sort of loving, wonderful, nice place to be, but then also please remember to steal somebody's lunch, stay competitive, constantly upgrade, make sure you don't screw up your exams, all of that. Like, I don't get that sort of double narrative.
And the other double narrative that, oh, the government cannot help you because you're supposed to stand on your own 2 feet, and no crutch mentality, and this is Asia, you take personal responsibility. And then at the same time, oh, the government is going to tell you how to lead your lives. It has every right to meddle in your lives and control everything you do, and that, we're not the West with individual rights. I mean, which one is it? If you want us to take responsibility for our lives, then you have to let us make our own decisions. But if you are going to control our lives to such a great extent, then you have to take responsibility for what happens to us. Which one is it?
Exactly, yeah. But a lot of the way things are set up, a lot of people are just kind of like thrown aside. And even let's say like in terms of like receiving welfare or help from the government, it's like, okay, we'll just deal with someone who has all of these criteria. A lot of people in need in the mutual aid community are people, let's say, with foreign spouses, or people who are on LTVP passes, which doesn't have as much, I guess, benefits as someone with LTVP plus pass. So, all of these things. It's terrible.
I mean, what I'm thinking about here is also that, like, remember when we were discussing that debate about Vivian Balakrishnan, right? And then sort of Chee Soon Juan brought up that point about how all of the rich people are kind of in one area, right? And that really reminds you about how the wealthy kind of get wealthier by tapping on these networks of communities, right? And why I think this is particularly powerful also is because it's not about handing out handouts, right? It's about building that sense of community, those networks of relations, right? Which is really just inverting the power structures that the wealthy already have, and then taking that, co-opting that for the for people who really need it, people at the bottom of society, and giving them that power, giving them that sense of community and those networks to tap on. So I think that's a very sort of interesting way of rethinking the way that we do activism, not as handouts, but as community building. Yeah.
Yeah, even let's say, I mean, when the poor and need help, they're always stigmatized, right, for what they receive.
Yeah.
But, I mean, the rich get help all the time.
Right.
Yeah, I mean,
look at the tax breaks, right?
Exactly. Like, you don't call that like handouts, but it practically is. They don't need it, but they get it.
Yeah.
And then it's just like, it just doesn't make sense to me at all.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's like how they say, Ong Ye Kung said all schools are good schools, but there's a clear difference because schools with very rich alumni get to donate massive amounts to the school, and those can't go to, say, teacher salaries or, so there are certain areas you can't spend it on. So instead, they build big buildings, massive facilities, and buy all sorts of things which help the students. So the MOE may say, oh, we treat the schools equally. I mean, that even is debatable. But even if they did, rich schools with rich alumni get massive donations to help. And so there is genuine inequality, from the very beginning of our lives when we enter the educational system.
Yeah, I mean, we can see it. When they say things like that, they have to know. I'm sure they know it's just words.
Yeah.
It's not as if we can't, we haven't experienced the schooling system for ourselves. And so I don't know, they just say words sometimes as if they don't mean anything. They just make sounds with their mouth.
I wish that was. I don't quite believe that. I don't know. I sort of feel like it's not rhetoric. They genuinely believe that.
That is really sad. And
well, that's also part of the problem, right? From where the elites sit, everything seems fine to them.
that is very true, yes.
We have New Narrative has published articles showing how elites genuinely believe in meritocracy because they succeeded within a narrow system that is very competitive without realizing that by virtue of their birth and socioeconomic background or who their parents are, they're already so privileged and in the top 5%.
Exactly.
You know, and they think that just because that 5% is competitive is meritocratic, when actually 95% of Singaporeans have no access to that, and that is very problematic.
And that's the thing, right? It's because of isolation. Basically, the rich can believe that because you're so isolated from everybody else. Like I read this article, the title was "Why Are Rich People So Mean?" And you know, they in the article it's mentioned actually the rich are more likely to steal something from a store. They are more likely to break rules. Because rules are just fines for them, which they can just pay. I'll just pay the fine if I get caught. Yeah, and also they found that the richer you are, the more isolated from community and the larger society you are, which actually enables the slow deterioration of your that sense of empathy that is, you know, it's you need that relating to other people to kind of foster that human sense
That human
within you.
interaction, yeah.
But a lot of the rich are just really isolated, and the way we structure our society enables that. It enables the isolation of people, and then they don't even realize that they are so isolated, and so they think that they can make really, I guess, like definitive statements about how meritocracy works, because all around them all they see is just people just like them, and they think that's the world, but it's not true. They have not interacted enough with people who live very different lives, and I think if it happened, they wouldn't know how to. Yeah.
Okay, so on that note, I guess we're out of time. So I want to thank our friend, our member of our community, of our mutual aid community, for coming here today and talking to us about Where's Mutual Aid. And if people want to contribute and be part of this community, we'll have a link in the show notes. Yeah, and I think you've given us a lot to think about inequality and all the systemic structural issues in society. So I know you're very busy and you've got a lot of work to do. So I want to thank you very much for coming.
Thank you for having me. Yes.
Yeah, thanks so much for
Yeah.
coming down. That was really, really enlightening.